We've got Jamie Jenkins reporting in from South Wales, Welsh Wales. Jamie, very good morning to you, sir.
Not there yet, sorry.
Oh, he's not there yet?
No.
Well, the one guy I was expecting to have isn't here. And I've got all these other characters. Anyway, we'll come back to that. I'll tell you what we could do. Should we do Plank of the Day?
Let's do Plank of the Day.
Let's do that.
Hello, it's Plank of the Day time.
Now, I don't normally do a lot of sport on this show, but we thought today there wasn't much around, apart from obviously Keir Starmer being plankish every single day. We can't make it him every single day. But we're going to do Arsenal today because Arsenal are supposedly top of the league, right? I think haven't won the Premier League for 20-odd years, right? And last night, they were in a position to be 7 points clear at the top of the league over Manchester City. They would have had 60 points, I think, had they beaten Wolves, who are at the bottom of the league. And one of the reasons why we're making them planks is because, one, Keir Starmer is an Arsenal supporter, which is good. And also, so is Rees-Mogg, who's actually not a bad guy and a good mate of mine, but I'm going to make fun of him for now. A cock-up between goalkeeper David Raya and a bloke called Gabriel basically resulted in the 94th minute own goal, which meant that Wolves went from being 2-1 down to drawing 2-2, which now means that Manchester City can win the league if they win every single game that they've got, including one against Arsenal, which basically means that Arsenal will have yet again bottled it, thrown away the possibility of winning the league, which will drive both Piers Morgan and Keir Starmer insane. So that's got to be worth Plank of the Day in anybody's book, hasn't it? Absolutely brilliant. So Mikel Arteta is the manager. Tore into his Arsenal flops, it says on the back page of The Sun, after they threw away a 2-0 lead to blow the title race wide open. That bloody coffee machine's making a lot of noise, isn't it? Anyway, so Plank of the Day goes to Arsenal. Thank you very much indeed.
Hello, it's Plank of the Day time.
Now, are we still waiting for Jamie to hook in to us? All right, so let's have a look at Jacob Rees-Mogg, shall we? He was here just the other day, basically confessed to us that he was fascinated by what we were doing here because we're having such a great deal of success off to the side in the independent space. But he also wanted to talk about herons, which Christian was going to ask us about, actually, but we didn't get around to it. So here he is, talking about the herons. Final question, because Lord Viking is one of our very regular contributors. Does Jacob like herons? Now, that's the question. Now, you might have noticed that there's a sort of heron theme going around the studio. And the reason for that is that I live down by the River Thames, sort of opposite Canary Wharf. And I came out of the house one day when I was in the midst of plotting this new beginning for myself to see a huge heron sitting on the railing overlooking the river. And that was some kind of omen. And I thought, because I've never seen a heron there before, I didn't know there would be one.
This is absolutely brilliant, because this is so like the ancient Romans, who were always looking at which way the birds went. And one of the cleverest things Julius Caesar did was made himself Pontifex Maximus, the high priest, which gave him the power to determine what the omens meant. And if it was not a day that was going well for him, he said, well, the omens say you can't make any decisions today.
Wow.
And he was able to put it off the next day. So I think you have a wonderful lineage, your loving of herons and your study of the omens of birds, the auguries.
Yes.
And I think herons are beautiful
birds.
Well,
what's interesting is that people from all over the world are sending me pictures of herons that they've seen.
Oh, fantastic.
We've got a couple of herons in. One complaint that one's actually more of a crane than a heron. There
are lots of cranes at Canary Wharf too.
There certainly are. Amazingly, I don't know who's paying for them to be built. But one of the things that I found out was that in lots of different cultures, the heron is a harbinger of new beginnings. It's something that...
well, of course, yes. And the crane brings the baby and all of that, yes.
It's all of that. So
That's how I got 6 children. The crane just delivered them. It was quite remarkable.
That's incredible. Well, Somerset is a weird place.
It's not a weird place. It's God's own county, I'll have you know.
I used to live in Devizes. I know very well how strange it is. Anyway, listen, Jacob, great to see you.
Absolute pleasure. And I'm really excited about what you're doing. I think it is an exciting and interesting development.
Jacob's got some interesting things to say, actually, about... We're going to have to lengthen that clip, I think. It's been sort of, shall we say, unwisely edited early, I would say, because he talks about how fascinated he is by what we are actually doing. Jamie Jenkins, I think, is here. And we're ready for you, Jamie. I've got the super glasses on, just in case, there's any light emanating from South Wales that we need to be careful about. Good morning to you.
Good morning, Mike. I was thinking as well, because you're one of the hardest working presenters. Whenever you're on holiday, you need to get that former BBC presenter Andy Crane in, I think, because
Yeah,
just add the number of cranes in the studio. Or get him in when you're on your
it's a
next
good
holiday.
idea. Andy Crane, yeah, brilliant. Let's talk a bit about the economy, I suppose, to begin with, because we found out, well, two things really. The unemployment levels now rising well above what they should be. Highest level of unemployment now for 5 years, I think. Highest level of youth unemployment in 11 years, I think I'm right in saying. And then also, bizarrely, this ridiculous story that came out yesterday that inflation apparently is down, which I don't believe for a second.
Yeah, so a big week on the economic front. Not great news for the government on the employment stats, Mike. So there's two different sets of figures, and I used to work at the ONS, as you know that. So I'll just break them down what we've actually had. So we get a survey that tells you kind of how many people are in employment, how many people are looking for work. And you're right, the unemployment rate's highest for 5 years, and it only peaked up in that period because we had basically the COVID pandemic. So it's pretty much 10, 11 years the highest unemployment rate that we've had, and it's only going in one direction. And then we also get the HMRC. So when you pay your tax, basically you're on the pay as you earn tax system. They track how many people are on the system paying tax as well, and we've got some data there. And we've lost 162,000 jobs since the election, and things aren't getting great there. But over half of that loss that we've had, Mike, are young people. And we've talked, I think, on your previous show when you was over at the other place, we've been talking for months about this. So there's been a lot of talk in the last week about youth unemployment. But, if you want what's really going on, just get on your show, because we've been talking about this for a long time. And half of that job loss has been young people. A lot of people talking about the national minimum wage rises. A lot of people talking about the jobs tax. Again, we've been talking about this for a while, but it is biting. It is having an impact. And what's more revealing, Mike, yeah, we have ticked over the European Union now. So we've got a higher youth unemployment rate here than we have in the European Union when you take the average. UK is still lower than places like Spain, but there's two countries in the world, Mike, that do really well. You've got Germany, really low youth unemployment, and Japan, significantly lower as well.
Yeah.
The reason, Mike, basically they have a workforce and an education system that are married up. So in Germany, there's a good pipeline from school to work. In Japan, you've got a good graduate recruitment. So when Tony Blair back in, when he came in, education,
Yeah.
I've seen many graduates on the TV, because they've been talking about this across lots of media outlets, graduates coming out with first class degrees saying, I put hundreds of applications in, I'm not getting any reply, or I'm not getting a bite. That's pretty much, Mike, because we've got an education system completely separate from a work system.
Yeah.
Loads of people going off getting first class degrees in subjects that employers got no interest in. And that's another legacy of Tony Blair.
It is. But also, even people with degrees which you would think would actually be useful are finding it difficult to get jobs. I was listening to a show yesterday in which somebody rang in and said their son, who's got a sort of engineering degree, which you would normally think would be absolute entry level, no problem at all into a manufacturing business, was struggling to get a job because there's actually no jobs in manufacturing because businesses are now so unsure about what's going to come down the pipe in economy, in the sense of the economy and how bad it's going to get, that they're just not hiring.
No, an engineering, manufacturing, what do they rely on, Mike, to do their roles? They rely on energy, they rely on electricity. And we talked in a few weeks ago, didn't we, about the highest energy prices in pretty much in Europe, 4 times what we got in the USA. So the manufacturing sector is uncompetitive when you're comparing their input costs of electricity. And I know Richard Tice was talking about, I think at one of the reform launches this week, about getting, going back into the North Sea, drilling, potentially doing fracking. And Ed Miliband was calling him out on this, saying that it's going to increase energy prices, reforms policy. Now, it doesn't take an economics degree, Mike, to realize that when you increase the supply of something, the price would come down. So the US have got significantly lower prices where they've got access to their own gas. So ultimately, Mike, if you want to get inflation down, and we can talk a little bit more about the inflation in a second, if you want to get inflation down even further, if you want to reduce the cost of living, if you want to increase jobs, the fundamental thing in the economy is energy. And if you don't get that energy price down, then you're not going to be competitive. It fills through to all parts of the economy. And that's why probably people are struggling to get into engineering roles. But that jobs tax, Mike, does have a big impact because, if you've got somebody with 10 or 15 years experience think, well, I'll go with those over somebody who's brand new because I don't have to train them up as much. So
Yeah.
that incentive of having a lower wage to start, or national insurance would be a bit lower as well. That incentive to employ that first person on the rung on the ladder has been reduced. And I think the Labour Party policy as well is to eradicate the youth minimum wage, and that's something that's going to backfire. I think there's talk of perhaps not increasing the minimum wage as much for young people. It's all very well, Mike. It's the same with the workers' rights.
What, another U-turn, you mean?
Another U-turn. The thing is, Mike, they champion workers' rights. But remember, you have no rights as a worker when you sat in the house unemployed. That's the problem with this government, Mike. They just have a lot of ideology of what they want to do, but don't think of the real world harm they do to people every single day.
Yeah, I mean, that is the problem, isn't it? And a couple of people are sending in some interesting questions, including the sort of mention of the dreaded AI word, because I think a lot of companies as well are kind of waiting to see what that's going to bring them in terms of whether they need to hire more people or maybe hire fewer people, because jobs that would traditionally have been done by graduates actually could now be done by AI.
An element of that, Mike, but what's the hardest hit this part of the economy at the moment is basically hospitality. And when you look at hospitality and you go into the bars and people are serving you food, we haven't got to the point, Mike, where robots are coming out and serving you pints and serving you food. So, but AI will have an impact, but it could have a positive impact as well. If you think about the amount of borrowing, and we got new borrowing figures out tomorrow from the ONS, and I'm sure we'll talk a little bit in detail about those next week, Mike. But if you think about the public sector and how kind of inefficient parts of the public sector, I always think, Mike, so I've been back and forth with a family member in hospital the last year, and you go and you go and speak to the doctor, and everything in Wales is a bit behind, again, England. Everything in Wales, it's all written down as notes. And then the notes are written down, and then the new doctor who's coming to see the patient has to read the notes, when maybe that time they're reading the notes would have been better spent with the patient, because we just need to embrace technology. You could get a system where everything's digitalized, AI can summarize, what do I need to know about this patient quite quickly? So AI could have a positive effect in getting things like waiting lists down, because rather than the inefficient of reading notes, writing notes, you could be dictating things on the fly, Mike. And this government needs to embrace that. I don't really trust this government to embrace technology, Mike, because they can't get the basic things right.
Well, I wouldn't trust this government to go down the corner shop and buy me a packet of bubble gum, to be honest. I mean, they're useless, hopeless. But what about the inflation figures? Because, I mean, people are baffled. A lot of people, like me yesterday, I was like, how is it possible that the inflation figures are technically going down, according to the ONS? Because everybody knows that's not true, but they're clearly using a kind of a method and a basket of whatever it is, goods and services that they count, to create something that they want to create, because obviously the government would like to say that the inflation figures are going down, but everybody knows it's crap.
Well, so the first thing to explain, Mike, is when inflation comes down, some people think, well, prices aren't coming down where I am. And so if inflation's still above 0%, prices are still going up. So all that we've seen yesterday is, according to the average across the economy, the average prices are going up, but they're going up a bit slower than what they were the previous month. And some of the key drivers, because Starmer has been putting out tweets about saying, this vindicates the economic plan is working, our choices are basically reducing inflation. First thing on that, Mike, inflation maybe slightly down is 3%. It was 2% in June 2024, the month before the election. So if they want to talk about their choices of bringing inflation down, it's higher than when they took office. And the big things that were helping to drive inflation down, actually, Mike, were things outside of the government's control. So oil prices have been coming down, and that's factored into the basket of goods. So paying for your petrol at the pump, obviously if you've got an electric car, it doesn't make any impact there. But if you're paying at the pump, you are seeing some slight reductions in petrol prices if the forecourts are passing that on. And another contribution was airfares as well. I'm assuming perhaps the oil price is feeding through to air fuel as well. Air prices come down a lot as well. But so that's the average of the economy. But air prices coming down, airfare prices coming down doesn't really help the family in Croydon, Mike, who can't afford even to go on holiday. So the figures are still too high, above the Bank of England target. And ultimately, Mike, the government will jump on the fact that their plan is working. Rachel Reeves was talking about her economic plan is working. Well, if the plan is for inflation above target, is for job losses, for high borrowing, destroying the UK, if that's what the plan of Rachel Reeves is, Mike, then it's definitely working for her.
Yeah, absolutely right. Good to see you. Jamie, thank you very much indeed. Jamie Jenkins, tell us where your Substack is, where you can find it.
Yeah, so Mike, everybody, I've just published this morning all the figures on the youth unemployment story that's been going on. So people can get across to just Google Stat of the Nation or just chuck my name in Stats Jamie, statsjamie.co.uk, get my Substack and get everything direct to you for free basically on that, Mike, and get over to yours as well, get your numbers up. I think, as I said to you last week, the only growth in the economy is your subscribers, I think.
Absolutely right. Good to see you. Yeah, Jamie Jenkins, thank you very much indeed.